just recently gave a seminar to the American Academy of Family Physicians. And we talked about strategic thinking, and one example of that at the board of directors level is this concept called the annual calendar. Well, let's assume that your board of directors meets once a month, although many boards at nonprofits meet quarterly or twice a year. But if it meets once a month, there are probably 6 or maybe 12 areas where your board of directors wants to be very much involved to help plan for the future of that organization. So one of the areas might be employee and professional development. So think about that. At what month during the year would you like the primary report at the board meeting, the primary focus of the board meeting? And yes, you have to approve the treasurer's report every month. And yes, you have to deal with emergencies. But pick a month of the 12 where employee and professional development will be the #1 topic on that board of directors meeting. Of course, boards of directors have to be involved in finance. And so finance and audit may be a second month, and you pick the month for that. Fundraising is critical. Program development is essential. Developing strategic alliances with other nonprofits. Developing marketing programs and communication programs so that people can know what your nonprofit does. Relationships with government, especially if you're reliant or your target audience is reliant on government programs, services, and funds. Each one of these 6 activities, when do they come up during the year? When are you going to have a board meeting where people can be well prepared months in advance, weeks in advance, and certainly days in advance to deal with that issue in great depth? Well, there's certainly other issues. The nominating committee of the board, and who's going to be on the board next year or the next 2 years. There are bylaws committees and the governance issues. There's evaluating your CEO and senior staff. So all of these areas, what I recommend is this concept called the annual calendar. So that a year in advance, you know which month you're going to focus on which particular issue. It's certainly always the case. Then an emergency will come up and you may deal with an issue in January that you'd hope to deal with in depth in March. You have to do that. It's the board's imperative. However, by being able to set out a full year in advance that each month we're going to focus on this, really sets a calendar. You know, an orchestra has to decide sometimes years in advance what music it's going to play. The Olympics, we're now setting years in advance, decades in advance almost, as to where the Olympics will be held. The Rotary Annual Convention of 20,000 people has to plan years in advance. Certainly boards of directors can at least set up an annual calendar where we know each month, well in advance, who's going to be on the hot seat, where the plans are going to have to be presented most precisely, and where the discussion is going to lay. I hope you will look at this concept called the annual calendar to help your board of directors improve its operations.